Okay. It's just something that you're doing outside of your main gig.
That's good.
And I think if your board is okay with that, if they see the value of that, I think it can be valuable. It could be a win-win for everybody. But the board needs to be okay with it. I think your spouse, if you're married, they need to be excited about the things you're doing. I don't know if all that's great wisdom, but those are kind of from my experience.
It's interesting you made the reference a while back in our conversation right here about if you don't want criticism, then sell ice cream. And you've decided to sell donuts.
That's right.
As a way.
I got to have some place where I make people happy,
And yet I even believe there's probably some people with some complaints about it. There wasn't enough glaze on this one. Following Jesus isn't always easy, but it's not complicated. One of the things that is complicated is taking over a mega church that survived a scandal. My buddy Dave Dummitt did just that with a church up in Chicago, and he lived to tell about it. And 5 years later, decided it was time to walk away. Why did he do that? And when do you know it's time to walk away from whatever it is that you are doing? And how did God sustain him during difficult seasons? We're going to get into all of that today on Simple Faith. If you haven't already, click subscribe so you always get our content. You may want to share this with a friend or review it or rate it as soon as we are done. But thank you for being here today. And here's my conversation with Pastor Dave Dummitt. Dave Dummitt, welcome back to the podcast. I've lost track how many times you've been on. I think 2 or 3, maybe 4, but...
the listeners have said too often.
Too often. Well, we run into these lulls every now and then where we think we just got to fill some space, and we bring Dave on and makes the next podcast look great. So...
Oh, okay. Thank you. That's great.
Hey, man.
This is starting off well.
It really is. Okay, so... For our listeners that don't know, just tell us the 90-second Wiki page of Dave Dummitt and just get us up to speed on where you are today.
Sure. I planted a church in Michigan, and God kept surprising us there. It grew. And then 5 years ago, Willow Creek reached out. They were in a bit of they were in trouble post-scandal, a lot of things going on, and asked me to come help. And so I stepped into that role 5 years ago. And then just recently, not 2 months, 6 to 7 weeks ago, we announced that I'm transitioning out as the senior pastor, and Sean Williams, who has been our South Barrington campus pastor, is going to be, or is the next senior pastor.
Okay, so you walked into a difficult situation, and we're not going to name names or get into all the details. It's all out there on the internet for people to follow. But
sure,
the reality is Willow Creek Community Church in South Barrington, Illinois, had been, just a flagship church for what's often referred to as the attractional movement or seeker-sensitive, seeker-driven type of church that really changed the landscape for churches in the 80s and 90s especially. And then, their founding pastor was kind of forced to resign, and there you go. So they were in a bit of a tailspin. How long were they without a senior pastor formally?
I think it was just shy of 2 years, like 22 months, I think is how long it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, they had approached you several times. Let's talk about that a little bit because, obviously you and I are friends, so I kind of know your story and know what's going on. I know they reached out a few times, but you said no. Why was it the right thing to say yes when you did?
Well, I'd said no because I was at a church where culture was good, momentum was good. Everything was up and to the right. We were having fun. And when they called, Willow was a little bit bigger. than our church. But for me, it wasn't about, pastoring the biggest church. It was about how many people can we reach for Christ in my lifetime. We have one life to invest, and I want to invest it the best way I can. And at that point, I was thinking, gosh, I'm going to take culture and momentum and health over just a big church that was in decline. And it was about a year, and they reached out like 2 or 3 times. And it was my wife that said, hey, David, have you ever thought about, you're saying no because 242 was the name of our church. 242 is healthy, and you've got leaders, and you've reproduced leadership in other people. You're saying no because it's healthy. Maybe that's the reason God keeps kind of nudging us this direction to Willow, because if we go to Willow, maybe 242 continues to be healthy. New leaders pop up and take over. And then assuming God would bless our ministry here at Willow turns around, and now God's got 2 healthy churches. And maybe in that decision and in that move, we end up reaching more people because you have 2 healthy churches. And so,
right.
The Holy Spirit through my wife, that's that happens a lot in our house. So that's what
I often find the Holy Spirit sounds a lot like my wife. That's the voice that I often hear.
Especially the conviction.
And the repetition, the redundancy. It tends to finally get through to me.
Exactly. It only took me a year to get it right.
You're ahead of the game there. All right. So you guys decide to pack up and move to Chicago. And, it was difficult for the first reason. You were moving during COVID. Yeah. It wasn't all this pomp and circumstance of you arriving. Your first intro to the people was on, online.
On Zoom.
Zoom. And then here you go. So how did you know that you were beginning to make headway when you felt like, all right, things are beginning to move in the right direction? Was it just the free fall had stopped, or did you sense that, no, we're beginning to trend upward?
Yeah. So, I thought I was walking into just, the senior pastor being gone, and now I'm going to be the new senior pastor. And that has enough challenges of its own. But what had happened over the course of that 22 months is a lot of the staff team had left. The top 20 folks in the organization, there was only one of those people that was still there. You had a lot of battlefield promotions where people were kind of being promoted on the spot, just to try to hold things together. And so there were lots of new people in new roles. Culture had just been, if the pendulum was up here, it was just swinging back and forth and back and forth. I think when we started to sense a change was in the context of our staff chapel. Willow had it'd been sort of a part of their culture. They didn't pray together. They didn't worship together as a staff team. The idea was you pray on your own, you come here to work. And so we facilitate church for everybody else. It was important for me to bring the staff together, to worship together every week, to pray together every week. And it was really in the context of staff chapel that I started to see some of the culture and the attitude of our team begin to change. We did a week Tuesday morning when I got up and I just said, hey, we tell everybody the importance of being vulnerable and asking for help and having community. Do we ever do that for ourselves? And so I just made space and said, if there's anybody that needs help, you're struggling, I'd love to invite you to come up and just ask for help. And then invited other people to pray for that person. The first person got up, shared this incredible story. There were tears in the room. People got up and prayed for that person. And then just people started coming up, popcorn style and standing at the mic. And our staff chapel that was supposed to go an hour goes 3 hours as people are just praying for each other and crying together. So there was just these moments staff chapel like that. I would say the other thing is we started celebrating wins when we got together. And what was interesting was watching a people that would talk about, man, it's almost embarrassing to invite people to our church because Willow had been in the news for all the wrong reasons. And our staff was like, we don't even feel proud of working here. And then we start sharing wins and people start telling stories of new people coming to the church and new people volunteering and students that, were kind of headed this way, away from Jesus, coming back to Jesus. And you could just sort of feel the encouragement in the room just begin to change. So I would say first, the stories of wins started to come, and then the statistics started to come. We had this many more people at camp this year over last year, and this many more people in groups this term than last term. That's when we started to see the metrics turn around. But really, it started with just the culture of our staff team sort of coming together, worshiping together, and deciding, you know what, God's not done with this place. We want to be on mission together.
That's such a good word. The stories before the statistics. I think that's where, just knowing how you and I think, we usually start with statistics. Okay, let's get the numbers figured out, and what a great call to launch chapel that way. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I will say this too. I noticed that people celebrate what they value. And it was interesting for me to watch people, what they applauded in the beginning and then what they're applauding now. Because I saw the values of our staff change. In the beginning, it was people valuing other people being vulnerable or working through their trauma. Just a lot of work being done like that, which was all essential work. Mm-hmm. And then over time, the values begin to change. Like, you know what? Let's take a hill for Jesus. And we're applauding new leaders. We're applauding baptisms and things like this. So we really need to watch the values change.
All right, let me ask you this, Dave. There comes this moment where, as the lead pastor, you wear different hats, and you just framed this so perfectly as you needed to be the pastor to the staff for a while. And certainly that needed to happen, and it did happen through chapel. I'm sure countless conversations in the hallway or over lunch or in your office. There comes a moment, though, where you're like, okay, we also have to get some stuff done. And every day can't be a therapy session for somebody or constantly walking on eggshells because they have a lot of wounds or they've been triggered or various things like that. Talk about just kind of when to move on from, we're not doing therapy anymore. Now we're getting work done, or we're going to outsource this therapy. Is there a moment when you realize there's some people that they're too wounded to continue and they just need a fresh start?
Sure.
What was that like? Because that's a lot more art than science.
Yeah. And we were in a situation where the metrics were falling so quickly that, typically conventional wisdom would say, come in and make friends and then make changes. Mm-hmm. Come in, build trust, and then start to make changes that are popular, so that sort of get this momentum, and then go after the big changes that are going to have the big impact. And, I was here a couple of months before our operations guy came in and said, Dave, we can't afford to keep doing church this way. We had 7 campuses that were all doing their own thing. They were, there was no central service. We just had to become more efficient. And we had to do layoffs. There were just these decisions that had to be made. And so, to try and build trust and be the pastoral presence to our staff, while at the same time having to make decisions where we're cutting 15%, 20%, 30% of our staff, was really, really challenging. So, what I tried to do was just name the elephant in the room and help people understand the why, and it helped people sort of self-select. kind of where they fit. So we would say things like, hey, some of you are wounded by what's happened here. And some of you are wounded like you need to come off the field and you need to go to the hospital and you need to get surgery, and it's going to be a long time before you probably need to be off the team. There are others of you that you need to come out of the game for a little while, and maybe take a couple of games off and then come back. There are those of you that just need a little rest. You just need to come off the field, do a little physical therapy maybe or whatever. Let the trainer look at you, and then you can get back in the game. And there are some of you, let's be honest, that it's been 22 months and you're just raring to go. And so we just tried to name that everybody walking through trauma or walking through what this place went through, they go through it in different ways and in different speeds. And so we just would name it, and then we would invite people to kind of self-identify and then say, if this is you, then this is what we need you to do.
Yeah, that's really good. Okay, I want to talk to you just briefly because we did this in the last podcast, but I think it's helpful for people, especially leaders who deal with criticism. We all deal with it. It happens, to leaders of any organization. And even if, your leadership is 3 kids at home, it happens.
Yeah.
But you're going to, through this process, you had, staff that were unhappy with you, even though that's not all of them, they're the loudest. You have probably some leaders in the church that are unhappy with you. You have some just parishioners that are unhappy with you. And then you had the added influence of, social media and, how do we say this without saying their name? Christian bloggers that like to, shine a flashlight on everything as if they've, they're policing everybody. How did you know what to listen to and what to just say, I'm doing a great work and I can't come down, in the words of Nehemiah?
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Walk us through that.
Yeah. So when it comes to, a hammer can be used in 2 ways. A hammer can build things and a hammer can tear things down. And so there were some, whether it was bloggers or leaders in the church or people that have been around for a long time, high capacity folks, whatever it was, where, I'm listening to their criticism and I'm trying to see their reputation and go, are these people that typically try to use their hammer to build things or to tear things down? And if you're somebody that's trying to tear things down, I don't have time for you. I'm doing great work. I'm not coming down. I don't read your blog anyway. And, honestly, the people I'm trying to reach, they don't read your blog. I've never met a lost person that has read one of those blogs or even heard of them. So I don't really care. Right. But if you're somebody that uses your either platform or your influence or whatever, where you're really trying to add value and you have criticism, well, then I want to hear it. I want to hear it. And even if it's hard to hear, if it's going to make me better, if it's going to make us better, then I want to hear that. Now, when it gets tough is when you have somebody that maybe really wants to build you up, but they've been wounded, or maybe they're not as mature, they're a young staff person or that sort of thing. And so they have the best intention with their critique or their criticism, but they bring it in the wrong way, or they bring it reactive rather than out of response or thoughtful prayerfulness. And that's when you got to be like that, the gold miner who's got to get through all the dirt to find that nugget of gold to then use to become better and to help. And I was really tempted. And by the way, if you are doing that, you've got the young staff person that's coming to you, if they're hurt and they're trying to critique you, and but what they're saying, you can use a bit to go, that is not, I'm always tempted in that moment to go, oh, and by the way, thank you for this criticism. And now let me use this as a teaching opportunity to tell you how you should have brought that criticism to me. I was really tempted a lot of times to make that one conversation rather than to split those into two conversations. But
while we're here.
Yeah, while we're here, let me tell you how a mature leader would have handled that.
That's right.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think what they say with leadership is, you're going to get criticized.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not up for that, then go sell ice cream, because that makes everybody happy.
That's right.
And so I will say this. If there are a lot of pastors that utilize this, maybe you cut this out, I don't know. But you know how everybody's trying to figure out AI? Sometimes I'll get an email and I'll think, gosh, I really don't have a lot of time to answer this critique, this criticism in a thoughtful way. But I tell you what, ChatGPT can answer that criticism in a really thoughtful way. And maybe I shouldn't use, I still give it the right prompts, but I just don't give it the same time. And
you know
yet
what?
Those people get a very thoughtful response.
That's a very great answer, because what it does is it takes your emotion out of it.
There you go.
And it really allows, this very untapped industry to kind of say something in a way that may not quite pull the pin on the grenade like you would have if you'd said
Exactly.
it.
Yeah, let's throw that out there as a tip. But it's not a fully developed one yet, so just be real careful.
That's great. Well, I think we'll leave that in. That's really good. Okay. So 5 years, and at some point over the last year, you decided, I think my time here is done.
Yeah.
What led you to make the decision to walk away from Willow? Because some people would say, oh my goodness, you finally got the ship turned in the right direction. The numbers are up and to the right. People have settled down. You've got momentum. And then you decide, it's probably time for me to go.
Yeah.
Talk us through that.
Yeah. And I get that. A lot of people are like, goodness, you sowed seed for 5 years and now the fruit's starting to grow. What are you doing? It's a combination of things, honestly, Russ. And it wasn't a rash decision. It wasn't a quick decision. After year 3 or 4, I started to see that initial list of, sort of phase 1 goals, the thing where I said, if this is going to be, people were telling me it's going to take you 3 or 5 to 7 years to turn things around. I started to think about, okay, well, how will I know that I turned it around? What does a win look like? And yeah, it would include things like the attendance or the giving or those kind of metrics that people use, the healthy metrics like group attendance or group participation, volunteer engagement, those types of things. But we measure we try to measure everything that matters around here. So it's also staff engagement. They're like Gallup questions that we use. We use Net Promoter Score with surveys of our congregation. There were some qualitative things like we wanted to grow more diverse, younger. We wanted to clean up some theological ambiguity that had crept into our church. So there's just a lot of systems and structural things, cultural things. And so at the end of year 3, like we'd almost gotten there, and the money was the one thing. And then at the end of year 4, we had $1 million surplus. But at the end of year 4 is when I started going, we've kind of gotten all those things check marked. And I was looking forward to the 50th anniversary of Willow. Happens this fall on October 12th. And a couple of things I think were happening. I'm a problem solver. I like to galvanize people around an intense problem. I'm not a great manager of success or incremental growth, or, I'm not good at that. My wife is tremendous at, she'll teach piano. She taught our kids to read. So those little steps over time that then you look back and you go, wow, we've made a lot of, that's not me. I like intense challenges. It's an entrepreneurial thing in me. And so as the problems were getting solved, I found my level of engagement was kind of decreasing, my level of excitement and interest. And then I look at the 50th and I go, that is this incredible opportunity for vision. And I'm recognizing that the kind of vision that we were going to need to cast, the big things that we were going to chase, whoever cast that vision is going to have to see it through, or should, for the next 5, 6, 7 years after that. And I just felt my heart going, that's not me.
Not you.
That's not me. And then I started thinking about some of the other problems that I started seeing in, kingdom world, in church world, and going, gosh, I'd love to work on that. I'd love to work on that. I'd love to get, play in that box.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Willow deserves somebody that's more, more excited about Willow than he is about the other things that he's dreaming about. And then we've got Sean, this incredible communicator, incredible leader. And he's been with me. I have known Sean for 20 years. And he came to Willow at my invitation. And he's, just done an amazing job of leading, communicating while he's been here. And I'm going, we've got the opportunity to make this smooth, momentum building transition to Sean. And if we don't do it now, I don't think Sean's going to be around 5, 7, 8 years from now. I mean, he is a senior pastor just waiting to happen,
Mm-hmm.
And so I just came to our elders and I said, hey, I'm not resigning, but I want to start working with you to figure out this transition.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened last September, and we announced the transition back in, about 6, 7 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And Russ, it's been beautiful baton pass. It's been great for me. It's been encouraging and excitement about Sean. It's been tremendous.
I want to jump in on something you said there, because I've known this about you since the beginning of our friendship, and that is your desire to start things. You are an entrepreneur. When I hear you talk about your story, you always go back to the church you planted rather than working at one of the nation's flagship churches. You love that idea of startup. And you're going through this time at Willow, and it is a lot of, there is a problem to solve, which does create this galvanizing moment, but it's also a lot of metrics trending up and, kind of the incremental growth and all that, which I know just robs you of life. For leaders out there that are in a job that feels a lot like incremental growth, but they have this huge desire to start something or to fix something that's not necessarily in their 9 to 5, what do you recommend for them? Because not everybody can just walk away and go do that. Or some people are wondering, should I walk away and go, start this company or backpack across Europe or whatever it is? How do you balance that? There's a lot of talk in our field about, he's got a side hustle, he's got this going on too, or whatever. But for some people, it's really healthy to have a few other things they're doing as a way to kind of stretch that muscle a little bit while still doing their 9 to 5. Talk us through kind of the mental gymnastics there that helped you.
Sure. Well, man, I'm no expert on this at all, but I'd say a couple things. One is, when I came to Willow, it took every bit of, the complexity and the scope of this challenge took every bit of who I was. So,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't need to be doing anything else at that time.
Right.
And I did. I kind of gave up. There were a few things I was doing, and I told our board, I said, I'm going to be 100% Willow. I'm focused on this thing. As things calmed down a little bit, as there were still a lot of challenges, but as things calmed down in the environment, my mind starts to churn on other things. I don't, it's a disease, I think. But I don't play golf. So I've got like a lot more time than some other people. But I would say a couple things. One is be ready to fail at 9, 10 things before you find the thing that really catches. And I think if you're really an entrepreneur or an inventor or an artist, you have to love the process of it, not just the results of it. I think when people think about, I want to be an entrepreneur, they're thinking, I want to be a business owner. I want to see financial success. They want the rewards of it. I think you've got to love the process of starting things.
That's so
and
good.
Just experimenting, testing, and seeing how things go. So, I could tell you for every one of the either businesses I've started or ministries I've started or, whatever, I could tell you that have done well. I can tell you other ones that have not. The other thing I would say is I do believe that there are people, I believe I'm one of them, that I'm better at my primary thing if I've got a couple of other things going. I don't know if it's because I need that sort of tension released, or like for other people it might be a hobby. For me, it's like another business over here, another thing over here. I mean, this. Since I've been at Willow, we've started donut shops, like a family business franchise, because I need to be doing something. And when I have those things, it actually, I believe, helps me with Willow. Sometimes I get my mind on another industry or another challenge, and it gives me insights to bring back to Willow and look at my primary thing in a different way. Sometimes it connects me with people that help me learn things that bring me back to the primary thing. I think the caution that I would throw out there is, especially if you report to a board, you need to bring them in on anything that you're doing. I mean, a side hustle is not a secret hustle. Okay. It's just something that you're doing outside of your main gig.
That's good.
And I think if your board is okay with that, if they see the value of that, I think it can be valuable. It could be a win-win for everybody. But the board needs to be okay with it. I think your spouse, if you're married, they need to be excited about the things you're doing. I don't know if all that's great wisdom, but those are kind of from my experience.
It's interesting you made the reference a while back in our conversation right here about if you don't want criticism, then sell ice cream. And you've decided to sell donuts.
That's right.
As a way.
I got to have some place where I make people happy,
And yet I even believe there's probably some people with some complaints about, hey, there wasn't enough glaze on this one.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Okay. I want to just read something that I've been trying to find here because I read it a while back and I thought this just sums up what you have done so well. And it's from Tim Stevens, his Instagram feed. And we celebrated this with you, Dave, amongst our friends, but I wanted our audience to hear it. I just thought this was so good. 6 lessons to be learned from the Willow Creek pastoral transition. First one is know when to step away. You just did this so well. And I know that you wanted to step away about a year in, and you kept at it, and great job. Leave a place healthier than you found it. You crushed that. Pay attention to who God has raised up to lead. We all know people that have just stayed way too long, and there's probably reasons for that, but a lot of times it's ego, and there's somebody waiting in the wings that could have just taken that to the next level, and you've done it. Understand how God has specifically wired you to lead. We've talked about that, about just knowing, you're great at solving a problem or starting something, and then keep showing up. You guys just kept at it over and over again, and then finally get out of the way. Yep. So Man, great job in doing that. But I'm curious about this. In hindsight, we look back and go, wow, that looked pretty easy, Dave. You did a great job. 5 years. You turned that thing around and look what God has done through you. But I know there's been a tremendous cost to you emotionally, relationally, spiritually. Tell me, everybody thinks every pastor has all the answers, no doubts, no dark nights of the soul, just skipping through life with God hand in hand.
Yep.
When did you feel, and I don't mean a specific period of time, but what were the practices when you felt close to God? Meaning when things were tough, you did this. You leaned in at this moment. It was this book, this spiritual discipline. How did your faith develop during a very trying last 5 years?
That's a great question. Thank you for sharing that. Getting a well done from you is a big deal to me. Having my wife say, hey, you would have been justified to leave way before this, Dave, but aren't you glad you didn't? And, I had my kids say they were proud of me. She said she was proud of me. I've had people at the church just be really kind. And it's been a humbling and healing and encouraging season. It's like going to your own funeral, as I'm leaving. Everybody's saying nice things about me, and I get to see it. So it's kind of cool.
If I'd known this before, I would have stayed.
Yeah, exactly. Why didn't you guys tell me this before? The practices, I think that's important. I guess as you asked that question, there was a book that came out, Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And I remember that book. It was really popular. And I immediately translated it to, everything I ever needed to know I learned in Sunday school. And, I remember in Sunday school, just them talking about having a time alone with God every day, And, when leadership can be lonely, and it is awesome to have the creator of the universe to communicate with every day. And every once in a while for him to throw just the right reading and passage at you that, gives you life. I remember reading the story of him providing manna to the people and Jesus then talking about, give us this day our daily bread. And I remember bringing that into our lead team and just talking about, guys, this is difficult. This is so hard. But I believe God is going to give us just enough encouragement, just enough hope. There's going to be something every day that's going to be daily bread, and like in the way God fed me, I shared that with our lead team. And then that became something that kind of reverberated, and they would just kind of look at each other and be like, hey, that was my manna for today. Somebody shot me an email or I saw a statistic go up and to the right, and it was just enough for me today. So you just can't underestimate those times alone with God.
So good.
Community, having a group. I mean, you, Russ, and our friends, we've been friends for years, decades. And, when I was at 242 and things were just exploding in the right way, and things were, every time we turned around, there'd be some win. I had guys in my life that would look at me and go, hey, pal, you're not that good. Okay. You're not that good. So, just remember that. And then those are the same guys that were with me at Willow when I'm going, I need to quit and I'm horrible. They picked the wrong guy, and you and those other guys are going, listen, you're not that bad. You're not as bad as they say they are, as they say you are. So, I think community is a big deal. I will say one thing that I started to do at Willow that I hadn't really done a lot of in the past was just that gratitude journal. and that relentless positivity, where every day I'm just finding something in an intentional way, just a systematic way that I can be grateful for. Ray Johnston said this to me one time when I said, what's the secret to your leadership? And he said, man, just be the most encouraged person in the room. And that just always stuck with me. And I haven't always been the most encouraged person in the room, but I find that, when everybody else is got their eyes on the waves and the storm and, they feel like the boat's going to sink. And then they look at you and you've got gratitude and you've got faith and you're encouraged and you're going, man, just watch what God does here. This is going to be amazing. It wins you influence in the room because people just go, how do you have that faith? How are you not freaking out right now?
Right.
And it wins you influence. And so, I tried to practice that while I was here. And I think, that little bit of light shone even brighter because things were so dark here for a while. And so I think some of those practices have been helpful.
That's so good, Dave. Thank you for sharing that. All right. I'm excited about what's next for you because it's not just donut shops. And they are great donuts, but it's more than that. And it's going to help out a lot of people ministry-wise as well. Tell our listeners what's next for Dave.
Well, in true entrepreneurial form, I've got a few ideas, but I have a couple things going. But, Tim Stevens was a huge part of the team and the turnaround here. And so he's a good friend. We live like 10 minutes from each other. So he's got incredible momentum with leading smart. So I just told him, hey, when you've got a senior pastor that you think I could add value to their team or help them solve a big problem, let me know. So I'm going to do some coaching with them. What we did with 242, we built community centers and we tried to have those spaces utilized, not just on Sunday, but 7 days a week. And so I'm working with a real estate team on something called 7-day spaces. And the idea is, how do we make sure that we've got facilities that facilitate ministry throughout the week, whether it's bringing in sports or preschool or rentals or developing your property with assisted living or that sort of thing. We want to help church property be utilized for ministry 7 days a week, and not just ministry, but monetization. A church typically in the United States is spending 35% or more of their operational budget on real estate and typically using it, 5% of the time on Sunday morning, and the rest of the week it's sitting empty. That's horrible stewardship. And so the idea of monetizing that space in a way that maybe the church budget is now, 10% of their budget is being used on their real estate. Now they've got 25% margin that they can plug right into ministry. So I'm excited about that. Looking forward to helping churches with that. And then I'm also really excited about, and you'll sense a theme here. I think I'm going to call it 7-day leaders. And here's why. It's basically this idea that we've got these business leaders in our churches and our communities, and they're stewarding millions and millions of dollars, across the country, billions of dollars, and they're influencing hundreds of staff people, thousands of staff people across the country. And as faith leaders, as pastors, a lot of times pastors don't know how to relate to those business leaders. So you've got this guy or gal leading a staff of, let's say, 100 people in your community. They've got all this leadership horsepower, 6 days a week. And then when they finally get to the place where, they say, how can I help, Pastor? On the 7th day, on Sunday, we go, well, why don't you be on the parking team?
Can you hand out a bulletin?
What's that? Yeah. Can you be a greeter for us? And it's like, how uninspiring is it for them? It's asking them to be on the parking team or be a greeter. But then when the campaign rolls around, we want a big check from them. And so how do we engage these business leaders? So I would love to come alongside pastors and churches and help them to create a thriving ministry for the business leaders in their churches. And we've done some of this at Willow, and we're seeing business leaders are reporting like 85% of them are growing their business is growing because of their engagement with these groups and this ministry. 95% are growing their faith and their friendships. And then from the church side of things, you've got church becoming more relevant to these folks. They're starting to invite their friends to church, which from a pastor's perspective, I'm like, really? You're inviting more high capacity leaders to my church? That's incredible. I'm watching generosity go through the roof with these folks, not because I'm asking them, but because they're more fully engaged with the church.
Right.
And really, the other thing, at Willow, we were kind of a boomer church. And as those boomers are retiring and they're moving to Naples, Florida, their businesses and their dollars are going away. This business ministry is giving these older more established business leaders the opportunity to raise up and mentor the younger business leaders in our church, which is sort of this long game of kingdom win. So I'm really passionate about that as well, and would love, if anybody's listening to this, I love the conversation, so I'd love to help your church.
How can people connect with you?
For now, just like any of my socials, but also DaveDummitt.com. We're throwing up a website. It's probably the worst website ever, but we're getting it started.
I think that's a great website.
Thanks.
It's got a catchy ring to it. Hey man, I love these ideas. I can't wait to see you do them, not just around the country, but for our church. That would be awesome. And bring a dozen donuts with you. And these are
absolutely.
These are not Krispy Kreme. This is a different kind of donut. And I, as a diabetic who has to pick his sweets carefully,
yes,
donuts are what I call insulin worthy. I love a good donut, and your donuts are great, man. So
thanks, Russ.
Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for being a friend, and I'm so grateful for your leadership in my life and so many others, and so excited about where Willow is going, where you're going, what you're going to do, and for you saying yes to God's call to go there, because as you told me one time, we owe it to Willow. They've done a ton for us as pastors and leaders. Somebody needs to step up and say, how can I help? And you did that, and you did a great job, my friend. And I'm just, when all that news came out of you handing the baton over, I was so proud to say, I'm Dave Dummitt's friend. So well done, brother. Love you, man. Thank you for being on the show.
Absolutely. You're awesome.
Always love hanging out with Dave. Such a good friend, such an amazing pastor, leader, entrepreneur. I know you're going to be blessed by him, whatever platform you find him on. So make sure that you check him out, DaveDummitt.com, and listen to what he has to say. Be following him and the new stuff coming out. I want to thank you guys for being here. I want to make sure you share this with a friend, share it with a pastor friend, especially. I might want to pick up on some of those great metaphors he gave us about, the hammer and understanding criticism and what to do with that, and about being the most encouraged person in the room. What great stuff. So make sure you share this, make sure you click subscribe, and make sure you join us next week as we bring you brand new content. We'll see you then, and as always, keep it simple.